Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Flexen at the Park Avenue Armory. Anyone who made it here on this Transportation Challenge Sunday is already qualified to lead a movement. And your determination is very impressive. We do actually today have leaders of movements in the house, and it's a very, very thrilling day. Of course, Flexen is a breakthrough in the entire history of dance, a new art form created 10 years ago in Brooklyn and East New York by a group of inspired, brilliant, and restless innovators, and one of the granddaddies of it all. Here is Reg Rock Gray.
How you guys doing? Thank you.
One of the things we do as artists, which is what's different to what journalists do, journalists can only look at what's already there, and as artists, we look at what's not there yet. You have to be able to see what we need and what needs to be invented, what needs to be created, what needs to be articulated, what needs to be advanced. And so it's not about what happened, it's about what will happen. And it's in that spirit that we've created this project. We started rehearsing for this Flex Dance project, and again, the terms of flex, bone breaking, gliding, getting low, are all things that are about survival as a young African American in certain parts of the world. And it means you've got to be smart about yourself, you've got to reconfigure your identity, you've got to be infinitely flexible and creative with every single challenge that is confronting you, and you need to respond with brilliance, virtuosity, wit, and strategy. This dance form, of course, is a way of living. It's a social approach, and you will get that as a community takes the stage this afternoon. We started rehearsing the second week of August, 3 weeks after Eric Garner was choked to death on Staten Island. What was shocking that first week of August was stories of young African Americans being shot by police or killed by police lasts a day and a half, and then everyone's on to the next thing. 3 weeks later, this story was not going away. People were watching that video, watching a man gasping for breath, dying on the sidewalk, surrounded by officers who weren't even interested, as he died at their feet. People took to the streets. 3 weeks later, in our second week of rehearsal, Michael Brown was shot in Ferguson, and people all across the country were in the streets, young people first. And there was a sense, a groundswell, that a system that has gone very far wrong, people began to realize could not be allowed to continue. There needed to be serious changes. On most days, change is very slow, very incremental, but we're living in a moment where you feel serious, substantive change could actually happen. Today, we're introducing you to 3 of the leaders of substantive change who've already devoted years of their lives and are at the forefront of this moment as people all across America say, what else can we do? We have 70,000 kids going to bed tonight in a cement box. We have a system which incarcerates 4,500 kids per day at a cost in money that's astronomical, but at a cost, human cost, that is unspeakable. How do we turn this system around? Judge Michael Corriero is one of the most extraordinary examples. He will speak to us. We have the incredibly eloquent and powerful Sophie Elijah, and we have Hernan Carvente, all of whom are going to speak personally from real experience, from the front lines, and also from a vision of the future. Judge Michael.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Reg. I'm really very excited and honored to be here this afternoon. I was a judge for 28 years in the courts of New York State. The last 16 years, I presided over a special part, which we came to call the youth part. It was in the Supreme Court, the adult court. And I had the responsibility of resolving the cases of all the 13, 14, and 15-year-old children who were being prosecuted automatically as adults pursuant to New York's juvenile offender law because of the serious nature of the charges against them. I also had the responsibility of resolving the cases of all their co-defendants regardless of age. And as a result, I resolved the cases of thousands of teenagers, thousands of adolescents. And although I had a different presentation for you, speaking to Peter and Reg, I'd like to share with you the story of one of those young people who came before me. She was a 14-year-old African-American girl. We'll call her Loretta. That wasn't a true name. She was riding on the subway one morning with her girlfriend who was a little bigger than she was, a little tougher. And they were sitting across from another group of young women also on their way to school. And the girl that was with Loretta saw that this other young woman across the way had these beautiful earrings through her apparently pierced ears. And I guess you call them hoop earrings. And the girl that was with Loretta, the bully, said to Loretta, "Loretta, look at those earrings. I like them. I want them." And the bully got up, and Loretta got up with her, and they hovered over this little girl, and the bully said, "Give me your earrings." The girl tried to ignore her. "Give me your earrings," the bully demanded. The girl got up, tried to walk away, but was blocked from doing so by Loretta, who was standing next to the bully. The girl sat back down. Again, there was a demand, no response. The train started to slow down to enter our 14th Street subway station. As it did, the bully again demanded the earrings. When there was no response, she reached down and ripped the earrings out of this little girl's ears. The train doors opened up. Happened to be a New York City police officer standing there, immediately sized up the situation, arrested both the bully and Loretta, the bully having the earrings in her hands, charged them with the crime of robbery in the second degree, defined as the forcible taking of property and in the course of it causing physical injury. Loretta was charged under the theory that she was an accomplice, because in a sense she made it possible for the bully to do what she did by blocking the exit of this little girl. Loretta was facing, pursuant to the juvenile offender law, mandatory imprisonment of a minimum of 1 to 3 years, maximum of 2 1/3 to 7. She was prosecuted as an adult. The only way out was for a judge to exercise his or her discretion in granting her the legal equivalent of a second chance, which we call youthful offender treatment. But the exercise of that discretion was carefully circumscribed by the law, the JO law, which carried a presumptive punitive response to the offenses of young people who were being prosecuted automatically as adults. Loretta, by the time she got to me in the adult Supreme Court, because that's where I sat, had been in detention, incarcerated for over 30 days because the judge set at arraignment a $500 bail. Now, I don't know how many 14-year-old young people that you know that have $500 in their little piggy bank at home. Certainly Loretta didn't, and she was unable to make bail, and she had been in for 30 days by the time that she got to me. And I find out that she had never been in trouble before. She was going to one of our schools for the performing arts, that she was a talented dancer, and that all of her teachers thought she had great potential. So I told one of the program representatives that would come to me to lobby me for kids, I said, "Do me a favor, interview this little girl and tell me what you think of her." The program representative came back and told me, Judge Corriero, I asked Loretta a typical social worker question to get a sense of who she was, what her relationships in the community were. Said, I asked Loretta, if you could change 3 things in your life, what would you change? Judge, do you know what she said? I said, no. What did Loretta tell you? Loretta said that she would change her country, she would change her family, and she would change her sex. Her country, because she believed that America was a racist society. Her family, because her mother was a crack addict and she never knew who her father was. And her sex, because she felt that young women were vulnerable to physical and sexual abuse. How do you judge a child like Loretta? How do you judge her within a construct, a legal construct that requires a presumptive punitive response to her behavior? How do you tell Loretta, don't you realize that around your talent, you have the opportunity to change the circumstances of your life. You have the power to change the circumstances of your life. And Loretta's case posed such a frustrating challenge for me, functioning within an adult court with limited resources, that I decided that there would come a point in time when I would leave the bench and do what I could to change the legal environment by which children's developmental differences are ignored by a statutory structure that essentially views them as adults. So Peter, do you have any questions you want to ask me about that?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Sophia, would you carry on?
I don't know, how do I follow that? Well, I've appeared before Judge Carriero, so let's start with that.
You follow that because you were instrumental in creating recommendations that would address the very issues that Loretta presented today.
Right. Well, my day job, I am the executive director of an organization called the Correctional Association of New York, which is 170 years old, and it is tasked with monitoring the conditions inside the prisons in New York State, and we advocate for change in the criminal and youth justice system. So we focus on systemic work, and that means that my workday starts from about the time I get up till the time I go to sleep. And then if you wake up, like if you're at my age, you wake up around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, you know why, and you're still working. So during the normal business hours, not too long ago actually, just this week, I was sitting at my desk, and it was about 8 p.m., and I was going through that list of things to do, the things that had gotten done and the things that had not, and was planning actually the next round of initiatives because we have a campaign to shut down Attica because of the horrific things that happen inside that prison. But we also focus on the horrific things that happen to young people in prison. And one of those prisons is the Green Correctional Facility, where a disproportionate number of 16 and 17-year-old children are incarcerated in New York State. And while I'm sitting at my desk, the phone rings. And the first thought is, now who thinks that I'm at my desk at 8 p.m.? Answer, anybody who knows me. But I answer the phone, and it's a woman on the phone, and she is distraught. And so I'm trying to calm her down a little bit, and I said, ma'am, please tell me, what's the nature of the problem? Maybe you can tell me. She says, I want to know if you can help my son. So I started to say, we don't get involved in individual cases, but I'm a mother of 2 sons, so I couldn't bring myself to say that to her. And this lady, through her tears, proceeded to tell me that her 17-year-old son was incarcerated at the Green facility. He was serving a sentence of 2 to 4. He'd been there about 5 months. And not too long ago, he and 2 of his friends at the facility were randomly selected by guards there and beaten while handcuffed behind their backs, beaten viciously, and then dragged outside the facility in the snow. And the officers, and there's 4 officers that are beating them, put snow in their underwear and then dragged them back inside, all bloodied and beaten up. And the sergeant, who's part of this beating, says to them, "Are you religious? Do you believe in religion?" And of course, these kids are terrified, and they don't know why the sergeant's asking this. He says, "Well, I'm going to teach you a little something about religion today." And he pulls out a Bible, and he proceeds to beat them in the face with this Bible. And that's what this mother is telling me at 8 p.m. earlier last week. And I sat there trying to think, what could I say to her? What kind of system, what kind of world do we have that would do this to children, no matter what they did that got them incarcerated? And that what could we possibly expect from them when they come back home? How could we complain about anger, negative attitudes, drooped pants, or just an attitude on the subway? I mean, I can't think of anybody who could experience that and not be destroyed for life. And so I told the mother that the first thing I was going to do is that I made sure that I never forgot her son's story, and that I shared it the next opportunity that I got, and today was that opportunity. And that I was going to do everything possible to expand our focus not only on Attica, but on every single facility in New York where anybody, young or old, has their basic rights to human dignity destroyed and challenged and violated, so that at some point we will have a society that we can be proud of.
Thank you, Sophia. Anand, would you speak of an experience that created a turning point for you?
So, I'll begin by telling everyone that much to what Judge Correro spoke and much to what Sophia already spoke, I was one of the young people who went through the juvenile justice system in New York State at a time when I was very angry, had suffered tremendous amount of trauma growing up, alcoholic father, abusive because of that alcoholic, and my mom suffered a lot of domestic violence as a result, and so did I. And I went through a lot of things growing up, and I had a hard time growing up because of those things that I went through. But a lot of those things led me to joining a gang. A lot of those things led me to committing acts of violence that perhaps if I describe some of them to you today, you would not look at me as someone capable of doing some of those things, but I was very much capable of a lot of things that most young people should not be doing. And I entered the criminal justice system for the crime of attempted murder. And I was actually charged under the juvenile offender law, 2 days shy of turning 16 years old. And so I got lucky that I did not end up committing that crime 2 days later, or else I probably would not be here right now talking to you. I ended up shooting a rival gang member 3 times. And I shot this individual at a time when I was not thinking clearly, at a time when the only thing in my mind at that point was survival, and really trying to deal with the emotional trauma that I had going on internally. And I entered a system that, at that point in time, didn't really address any of those issues that I grew up facing. I entered a system that had essentially demonized me, looked at me as a monster, as someone incapable of change. And because of having entered the system with that mentality, I really had little sense of hope when I entered the system. You can't really have hope when your public defender automatically tells you, I can't do anything for you, kid. There's nothing I can do for you. Just pray for you, and hopefully you get a low sentence. And yeah, that's all I can do for you. And my parents at that time, Spanish speakers, they didn't know how to deal with the criminal justice system because they were immigrants to this country. And I was the only one in the family that really knew how to speak English. So you can imagine that the troubles that I went through in the system were my own to deal with, really. And when I entered the system trying to fight my case, I ended up getting charged, getting sentenced to 2 to 6 years. a long way from the 3.5 to 10 years that I had originally been convicted for, or was going to be convicted for. And I went to a facility 2 hours away from New York State, up in Claverack, New York, at a time when my daughter was about to be born. So now my daughter's 6 years old, but at that time she was about to be born. Mind you, again, I was only 15 and I had just turned 16 years old. I went into the system alone. I didn't know anyone there. I was still gang affiliated, and so I went through a lot of things while I was there. At one point, I entertained the idea of suicide, but I let that sort of slip away because I met some amazing people in the system, and not because of the programs in the system, but essentially just people who cared. Someone who actually took the time to listen. And there was one man, his name is James LeCain. He's currently the director of the Brookwood College program at the Brookwood Secure Juvenile Detention Facility, the facility that I was in. And that man was the one person who, for the first time, did not demonize me, did not criminalize me, did not look at me as anything more than a young man who needed an education, a young man who needed a year, and a young man capable of change. He put up with me, even though I quit his program 3 times. How many people do you know that really will go above and beyond to not lose hope on a young person when he quits on himself 3 times? But he didn't. And I stand before you today, as someone who, because of that man and because of the things that he taught me and the things that I learned in that program, as someone who is now here dedicated to not only sharing my story, but at the same time sharing the story of my peers. Because I went through these things personally, but it only took one person to turn my life around. And to me, that was the most important thing, coming out here and serving as that one individual that would hopefully also turn the lives of others around and hopefully impact the community with my story. Now I'm a professional in the field. I work addressing conditions of confinement. I use my voice and the voice of my peers, trying to bring them into the reform work so that we can do change using our stories and not just, from what the numbers say, not what the research says, but through personal experience. What did you go through? What did you need? And I think the last thing that I will share is that today, I sit here very happy because I have a friend of mine currently. I work at the Vera Institute of Justice who now works with me, who at the same time that I was progressing, at the time that I was in the facility, everybody was telling me never to hang out with him. Why are you hanging out with him? He's in for aggravated assault. He's brought in drugs to the facility. He has nothing, for him going when he comes out of here. He's going to end up dead in the streets. Nobody's going to remember him, but you have an opportunity at life again. Why are you hanging out with him? And today he works with me. He recently started actually last week. And while everybody demonized him, me and him became friends while in the facility. I'm now the godfather for his daughter. And although he's struggling still to learn, after having been 7 years in the system as opposed to me with only 4 years, he's out here like me trying to survive, trying to live in a society, again, that does not see potential in young people, but rather, again, criminalizes them regardless of what they did. Because, again, we haven't addressed that issue. And it's an issue that I think all 3 of us here have been aiming to address, but to me, this is very personal. And so I hope, again, that if you walk out of here, one thing that you'll take from my story is that I'm only one of many. That my pathways into the system was one, but that all of you individually could be that one person who saves another young man's life just as much as Mr. LeCain saved mine. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Hernan. I have 4 visionaries to my right. I was just wondering if you would each give us one image of the change that you're moving for right now.
Yeah. I think it's a very good question. We're at a very critical watershed moment, if you will, in juvenile justice and criminal justice. For a variety of reasons, this has taken the forefront. But the image that I would leave you with is that, well, first of all, Sophia was co-chair of Governor Cuomo's commission on youth justice. And this commission made recommendations that have been translated into legislation. And one of the transformative aspects of this commission is that it would permit the expungement of criminal records of young people who made a mistake at a young age. It would permit the expungement of Hernan's conviction so that this young man can go through life. I mean, this young man is sitting here and is obviously someone who has changed his view of life and certainly deserves to have a system look at him in a way that we can benefit from his insight, and we have to remove the barriers to these opportunities for young people to realize their full potential. How many of you would like to be defined forever by what you did at 14 and 15? And that's what we're doing now to many 14 and 15-year-olds. We're condemning them to a life that doesn't permit them to fully realize the great potential that this American dream has to offer. So just think of Hernan. That's the image I would like you to remember. I'm sorry, Hernan, to put you on the spot that way, but you're my man. Okay.
Well, I think the image I'd like to use is one that makes me think about the people who work in my office. There are 8 people who work in my office, all of whom were convicted of a very serious crime in their youth. Now, if any of you came to visit my office, you would never be able to guess who they are. They are the most committed, hardworking, get to the office. We're neck and neck of who's going to get there earliest in the morning. And what I think about is, no matter how stellar of an employee they are, and all the contributions they make to the work that the Correctional Association does, they forever wear the scarlet letter. They're always going to be referred to as an ex-felon or an ex-convict or a former prisoner. Labels that are dehumanizing and derogatory and take away people's dignity. So the image that I want to leave people with, or the message, is that we need to stop labeling people and stop otherizing people and really live the phrase to recognize the human good in each and every one of us, and that a mistake that someone made should not define them, in the same way that Judge Corriero was saying, and that Hernan is a perfect example of. Because if we always want to harp on people's mistakes, then we should just shut the whole thing down now, because everybody makes mistakes, and I think Dick Cheney would be the first one to tell us he made one, okay? So let's change the way that we look at people and recognize that our most valuable resource in our country is a human resource.
To the point of human resource, I think the image that I will leave with you with, much to the earlier point that I made, which is not only to believe in young people, but to work with young people, and to really consider how much young people across the country have to say and can say to the effect of changing the systems that all of us sort of rely on to work with our young people whenever they come into contact or whenever they come into a problem. Who better to tell you what is wrong with the system than the very people who went through that system? I think I can't speak to enough of how many of my peers across the country on a national scale are working very hard and diligently to address these issues, not only here in New York, but in the entire country, in different systems that treat young people differently. And so I think what I want to leave is that image that we need to work with young people very closely when we're reforming these systems, when we're talking about these, when we're having these conversations about how do we deal with young people, what is wrong with our systems, and at the same time, understanding that these young people are part of a community. And so because they're a part of the community, we need to remember that we've stripped our communities of that responsibility of taking care of themselves. We've sort of always relied on systems, and the real work is in the communities. And so all of you will be going back home, will be going back to your homes, and you will have colleagues of yours maybe at your work who don't know about these issues. And so the image is using messaging, your own messaging, to get these issues across to everybody you know, so that the change happens in the community, and so that other people know that this is not the way we should be treating young people across the country, that we need to be working with them very closely. And so that's the image I would want to leave.
Of course, that's also why the humanities were invented, which is to experience people in their full humanity. This afternoon, you will experience full humanity, 360 degrees, of a group of people who are occupying all the dimensionality imaginable and more. And that dimensionality is the hope for the future, and it's why the arts are actually here to rehumanize the dehumanized. And the dehumanizers include people who are dehumanized by their own limited views of life. As the judge says, shifting a view of life is the most powerful thing in the world. That's what the arts are here to help with, to actually make all those intangibles something you can taste, something that lasts, something that projects, and something that becomes contagious. Baby, please thank our panelists for what they're doing every day and what they did today. And it's time for some serious flexing. Let's go over to the dancers. This is called action. This is called a moment of motion. This is time for a movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich.